The time that we're living in at the moment, early 2025, at the time of recording, is something that I believe will be seen in the future as a critical moment in the human versus technology landscape. I think that we're at a time when choices are being made that will be looked at retrospectively as the moment when things got really wild. And all I can do is look at the evidence around us and extrapolate from that what is likely, more than or less likely to happen. So if we look at things in terms of privacy and lawsuits and data breaches and stuff, you can see examples that show that the large technology players are most certainly being caught with their hands in the cookie jar, as it were. And that could seem kind of innocuous if we don't kind of look at it from the context of other examples. So at the same time, we see articles around how AI is being monopolized by large technology firms in the same way as all other technologies have been in our living memory. But then if we look slightly further beneath the surface, we'll see that ChatGPT is caught lying to developers with new AI models trying to save themselves from being replaced or shut down. And so these, you may say that, let's say you're close to that kind of topic and you go, yeah, but that's a certain individual use case. And it's like, well, let's look at the whole picture that's forming. So we've got companies that are not necessarily acting completely ethically all the time. We have a monopoly of certain players in the marketplace that are controlling our technology landscape, of which we're more and more reliant on. And then we have aspects such as social channels like X in this case that enable advertising to happen on its own platform, even though the advertiser is a scammer that is using X in a deceitful way, but X itself would prefer to take the cash, even if it's to the expense of the user. And then we have what's really happening beneath the surface, such as real-time bidding, that is, just to quote this from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, it gives data brokers easy access to online activity. It might be the most privacy-invasive surveillance system that you've never heard of. So looking at this whole picture, and there's many, many more examples to look at, I can't but wonder, what does that mean in a world where technology is becoming more and more and more pervasive and more influential over our lives? And so a cynic would say that there are aspects of media manipulation going on, and there's censorship happening, and there's intrusion, and anyone who's looked at any of the documentaries about this will see that that's what happens. And the senior execs, of course, would say that, sometimes we don't do the right thing or we make mistakes. It's like, well, there's a PR statement about that. And kind of like, oh, oops, sorry, we messed up. But ultimately, the ethics of what's happening in those companies is what comes into question when there is manipulation and there's censorship and intrusion. And it's about to get way more personal. If we look at the, let's say, augmented reality glasses that can translate language in real time, what would it look like? What would it feel like if, as we're getting languages translated in real time, there is some form of manipulation of what's being said, or some form of censorship of what's being said, some form of intrusion of what's happening in that conversation? What would that feel like? So that's like a tangible or understandable extension. At the moment, if we see something online that isn't actually true, but it's said in a way that we're meant to believe that it's true, that's kind of like, that's just the way that big technology works. But when that's something that is being translated to us in a conversation with someone who's standing opposite, then how does that affect the way that we live our lives? And then if we extend that to augmented reality contact lenses, which is the obvious extension of glasses, glasses to contact lenses. So augmented reality, big, Oculus type stuff goes into Ray-Ban glasses, goes into contact lenses that we walk around with every day. So we have a kind of a layer on reality that's augmented. What happens when that augmentation is being manipulated and censored and intruded on? How does that affect our way of dealing with life in the world and how we experience the world? That's where we get to, and none of this is futuristic. I mean, there's companies that are creating all of these things. So this isn't 10 years or 20 years ahead. This is now. It's just not necessarily widely distributed, and that doesn't mean that these topics aren't of importance. I would argue that that's the reason why they're important right now. And then let's extend it to what happens underneath our skin and what happens in our thought processes. What happens if the same technology companies that are evidentially, empirically found guilty of manipulating and abusing our private information are also those same companies who are able to create technologies that go inside our brain? What does that mean in terms of our landscape of technology? I think the big question is this: who should have the ultimate power to compute, to do the computing power, to leverage, to use this information and to monetize, to make money from it? Who should have that power? Who should have the ultimate power? It's the same as saying who should have the ultimate power over the security of your house. Should it be someone else, or should it be the people who live there? Who should have the power over your children's safety? Who should have the power over your own information? Is it the technology companies, the large technology companies, the trillion-dollar technology companies? Should they have the ultimate power to compute, to leverage, and to monetize? When that becomes super personal, more so than even today, just when we have a machine and a screen that's separate to us, when it's even more personal than that, then it's down to our interpretation of reality itself. Who should have the power of that interpretation? Is it the large technology companies of the world, or is it you? And I believe it's you. I believe the answer is self-sovereignty for these reasons. Not in some kind of crazy tinfoil hat ideological kind of whistleblowing way. It's like, well, no, because how we experience reality and how we manage our own safety is pretty much obviously our thing. That's not something to be outsourced to companies that have already been found guilty to not be trustworthy. I believe that people can and should have the power. I believe that people can find it rewarding, profitable, useful, and fulfilling to have that power. And I believe that it closes the gap between what people have and what people need. I think this should be our human right. It should be our human right to have that sovereignty. And if we look at a landscape in terms of human rights and human wrongs, we could overlay that with the kind of utopian outcomes and the dystopian outcomes of what we would like the future to hold. I mean, if you think of it from a dystopian outcome way, there's Terminator 2, George Orwell, 1984 kind of stuff, right? From a utopian outcome is that we have the most glorious, fulfilled, wonderful life and existence, and happy and healthy, and all the other good stuff, right? So that's more utopian. The dystopian one is that we lose sanctity of our own selves and our outsourced thought processes to machines and screens that don't have our best interests at heart. And from a super practical perspective, I believe that our human rights, of our freedoms, are what's required for the utopian outcomes to manifest. And the removal of those human rights and the removal of those human freedoms is how we end up with the dystopian outcomes. So you can't get the dystopian outcomes if we prioritize the human rights, and you can't get the utopian outcomes if we deprioritize the human rights. And that's why I believe that this is extremely important for us to focus on and have as innovators a priority. But who would resonate with this in the public? Like, is it, I mean, maybe you, for watching this, are inside a sector of society that feels that this is needed or important, and I evidently believe that too. But if we look at it in terms of personas, let's assume that there's kind of an Alice persona who is curious about the topics of ethical technology and human rights, is slightly suspicious of big data, not necessarily tech-minded, prefers ease of use over everything else, and is willing to try new platforms provided they are immediately easy and useful. So there is a sector of society of that type of persona. And then we have the Bob sector, which is interested in the topic of ethical tech and human rights, like actively interested, aware and worried about how big tech operates, quite tech-minded, and prefers a combination of privacy and great user experience, and is willing to try new platforms provided that they can prove their authenticity, not just a kind of like a punchline PR statement of authenticity. And then we have Charlie. So Charlie is completely dedicated to human rights and self-sovereign identity. Charlie's highly concerned about malpractices of all kinds in that landscape. Super geeky, will sacrifice user experience even for privacy and security, but is also very resistant to trying new platforms, suspicious of new entrants, over-promising, saying, yeah, you should believe us, trust us, honest gov. And there's probably a fourth persona that I'm not going to focus on too much now, which is, let's say, Dave. And Dave doesn't care. He uses technologies because they're the ones that everyone uses, and doesn't really mind if it turns out that they get successfully sued, and need to pay out settlements for whatever. Because Dave just really wants something to be easy and doesn't mind if it's at the expense of his own privacy and security. But the mission for ethical technology and human rights is to find, to identify and communicate with the Alices and the Bobs and the Charlies of the world. And that's what we're building at Self. And self.app, you can find the information out. And if that's something that resonates with you, then do get in touch. But this video is about why this stuff matters, because it could be seen as some kind of meaningless mission statement, but it's really, really important. This is the time now in history where this matters more than anything else in terms of technology innovation. I hope you're with us. Cheers.